Lunch and Learn and What If It's Not Depression podcast. I am interviewing Joanna Chodorowska, and she is a holistic nutritionist, a pain and inflammation expert, athlete, and a lover of life. She is full of life. I can't wait to have you meet her. And I just want you to know that she guides athletes to relieve their pain and health challenges so that they love their body again and have an active life more fully. So I'm going to repeat that. She guides athletes to relieve their pain and health challenges so they love their body and active life more fully. Joanna incorporates real food, anti-inflammatory, and mindfulness principles so that you master your body's own unique needs. Joanna next explores your response to stress and emotional injury from childhood, which often contribute to pain and illness. It's something that I talk about quite a bit with some of my patients. Joanna discovered through her own healing from adrenal exhaustion and a degenerating hip that the body can heal naturally given the right tools. She provides more than hope for you to get back to the active life you love. You learn to love your body, love your food, and love who you are. She has been practicing as a holistic nutritionist for 17 years. Welcome to our Functional Mind podcast, Functional Mind audience, and What If It's Not Depression podcast, all in one. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Achina, for inviting me to be here.
So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into becoming a holistic nutritionist? I know you've had a pretty, long journey in terms of you gaining your own health back. Why don't you let us know a little bit about that, and we'll jump into some of the topics that I really wanted you to talk about during this time, because there are actually specific topics that I haven't even discussed with my audience, and it's making me think I've got to do a specific real educational lunch and learn on two topics. One is emotional stress, eating, and the other one is adrenal fatigue / exhaustion.
Yeah, and adrenal fatigue, exhaustion, I can talk intimately about that one because that is really what catapulted me into understanding that the body can heal itself. And it really was, as an athlete at the time, learning and going through the adrenal exhaustion process and recovering and getting back to competing again is what helped me realize that, you know what, if I did it to me, other people are doing it to themselves. And I want to help others know that they don't have to be alone in this journey. Like this, I was alone, I felt, in mine, except for my doctor and my nutritionist, but I had to do the work to get my body to heal. I had to work through the stress in order to allow the body to heal. But that was 21 years ago that I had adrenal exhaustion. And 5 months prior, I had done my first Ironman triathlon. So here I went from, sub 12-hour Ironman to I can't walk to the mailbox and back without taking a nap.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
And it was a real, talk about the world falling apart and your world coming to a crashing halt. Okay, my whole life was all athletics and achievements, and I was in sales, and I was like, everything was a competition to me, and it was all about achieving and just, that drive to succeed. But it was like the drive to succeed with blinders on,
Right.
You can't see any beauty. No, it's right here. You keep going to the goal. So it was really that was God's way of actually getting my attention. Is, okay, you didn't hear me with a nudge. You didn't hear me with a shove. Here, let me just whack you over the head and knock you out so that you start paying attention to these other aspects of your life. You have to see these other things. And that was where I had to learn how to actually nourish my body in a physical way. And I had to reintroduce exercise in a different way and turn off that competitive mind of, okay, you have to do everything because there's a goal. You got to push. I had to learn how to balance. And same thing with the nutrition. I had to learn how to actually nourish my body in a physical way And at one point I was actually on 27 different supplements. And looking back, I'm like, man, I should have, but I wasn't in any mental state to be able to say, wait, my body doesn't want supplements. My body wants food.
Right. Right.
Juicing was probably the best thing that I learned at that point, because that was like the nutritional infusion of nutrients. And I felt the best when I did that. But that's when I had to start paying attention to, what am I eating and how do I feel best?
Right. Yeah. I always say that, food is medicine and food is poison. And we need to use food to really heal our bodies, but we can use supplements as a bridge. It's not the answer, but it can be the bridge to sort of accelerate the process, but you shouldn't depend on supplements completely.
Yeah. And at that point, I had gone through numerous testing and I was literally 70% depleted on all my nutrients. So I could have done it all with, juicing and food, but the supplements were something that was necessary. I don't know if I really needed 27. So I definitely don't suggest that for anybody now, even if they're in that situation. But the other part too, is I really had to learn, okay, how did I get here?
Right.
How did I get to adrenal exhaustion?
Right. So why don't you tell people what adrenal exhaustion is and adrenal fatigue is, because that's one piece that I'm realizing I haven't talked about very much in my Lunch and Learns and podcast.
So I'm going to give you my layman way of talking about adrenal exhaustion, because I think most people don't want the textbook of, okay, what's adrenal exhaustion? But you've got the fight or flight mechanism, and your adrenals are basically your fight and fight gland. So they will produce adrenaline, they'll produce epinephrine, they'll put endorphins, all sorts of things that help you to fight through a situation. So when I'm competitive, I'm like, yeah, I got a lot of adrenal stuff going on, and it's all good. But when you have chronic stress, and it could be emotional stress, mental stress, physical stress, stress from your food, stress from your environment, all these layers of stress keep those adrenals in hyper mode. And so they're on, and they're not supposed to be on all the time.
Right.
If you see if a deer sees headlights, yes, it will freeze. Their adrenals suddenly went into run or do something, but get out of harm's way.
Right. And calm down.
And once that threat goes away, then it calms down.
Right.
We as humans tend not to allow ourselves to calm down, because we get that threat and we're like, oh, and the ego says, oh, we got to protect you from that. And so it keeps protecting you by being more busy, by doing more stuff. Don't think about it. Just push through it. And so you basically never turn that parasympathetic nervous system on, so it doesn't ever calm down.
Right.
And you can just keep pushing until it has no ability to push anymore. And I kind of liken it to, okay, go to the track, start walking. Okay, start running. Now go run. You tell me you're tired, go some more. No, go harder. No, keep going. No, harder, but I'm really tired. No, keep going until you basically pass out. You've got no energy left.
Right.
That's what adrenal exhaustion is. You went to the edge, and now you're off the edge. You didn't just slip off. I mean, I didn't just slip off. I flew off. I was a running start, and I'm like, look, I can fly. Oh wait. No, I really can't.
Crash.
And I didn't know how far I fell. So it was okay, how did I get here? And I really did feel like I was the cartoon character that got steamrolled into the pavement. Right. And it takes only like 10 seconds for it that character to peel out of the pavement, but mine took a little bit longer because I was in a state of shock.
Right. Yeah. So do you think that, what do you think was the trigger that actually, was it because you were in overdrive because of the athletics and just not having enough nutrition supporting you? Or are you saying it's multiple drivers?
I have multiple drivers.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Multiple drivers. Because, when I look back, like, okay, how did I get here? Then I had to look at, the Ironman didn't do it. The Ironman just got me there faster.
Right.
So I was already nutritionally depleted. I was already stressed out of my mind, you know, and I'm just making it that dramatic right now because at the time I'm like, I can do all this stuff, you know, I am superwoman, you know, I can do it all.
Yeah. And in
And so
fact, might I suggest, and maybe I'm wrong, but you probably didn't even think you were stressed. A lot of times when people are in that state, they don't even know that they're in overdrive. Yes, no concept, right?
You know, but I had emotional stress. I had environmental stress. I had, you know, my work had changed where I was no longer in my own home office working as the, which had bay windows and natural light, you know. I was transferred to another office where I had to drive to, and it was literally like in a chicken coop. And, you know, I would get a headache within 90 minutes of being there, which to me was an indication of either something's wrong in the air or something else is wrong, but I don't like it here. So that was a stress. Plus I was training for an Ironman. Plus I had my car stolen, and this was my first baby that I actually bought. Then there was a relationship that, you know, I thought was like perfect, and that dissolved. And then my sister and I bought a new house, and then we weren't getting along. You know, I had the emotional stress, the mental stress, the physical stress. Then I was still training for an Ironman, and then I was just living on Cliff Bars and coffee, you know. And if I needed to do anything, like if I was stressed, I'm like, oh, go for another run. Oh, go ride your bike longer. Oh, you know, so more was my only way of coping with stress.
Right. Yeah. So, you know, one of the things that you mentioned in our discussion earlier was about emotional eating and emotional stress eating, and you know, what are some of your thoughts about how to address that when you work with someone?
So, you know, it's different for every person, but I kind of came up with, you know, 5 basic things. Mm-hmm. And really the first is you have to just accept the fact that you're having an emotional trigger. You know, and it doesn't make you a good or bad person. Let's remove the judgment out of the situation and just recognize that, you know what, I just got triggered.
Right.
I'm gonna be okay that this is the only way I can handle it right now, but I'm gonna eat that cookie. I'm gonna eat that Duff chocolate. I'm gonna eat the 3 Duff chocolates. I'm gonna eat the whole bag. No, I actually have my own private stash because that's my thing is chocolate. But you know, it's first it's just recognizing that I'm being emotionally triggered.
Right.
Then you really have to breathe. Like in through the nose, fill the base of the rib cage. And that process is on a count of 4, hold it for 4, and then exhale through the mouth. And you naturally feel yourself just kind of grounding and feeling connected to yourself. You're no longer in this place of chaos and freneticism, and you're actually able to stay calm. If it takes 2 breaths or 10 breaths, it doesn't matter.
Right.
Just repeat it until you feel yourself kind of calm down. And then go, what is my trigger? Why is that such a trigger? Why is that causing me stress? But you can't come up with the answer and ask that question unless you're already relaxed.
Correct.
Because then it'll be the mental ping pong.
Right. So grounding yourself into your body. Sometimes people are stressed and they're so much in their head, they are even out of their head. So grounding yourself into your body, doing some deep breathing, and then noticing the connection between the chocolate and what happened right before you had the chocolate, and to contemplate that and be curious about it.
Right. Yeah. And it's really just asking questions about that situation. You know, well, why is that a trigger? What can I do differently? Is that really a truth, or is it something that I just have to work through? Is it a situation that came up from childhood that's being basically brought into my consciousness again, so that I can actually replayed. Thank you.
Yes.
So that I could work through it in a different way, and maybe I can actually see it from a different viewpoint. maybe I'm not the jerk in the situation. Maybe they're not the jerk in the situation. Maybe we both have an equal role in this, and I never spoke up for myself. Maybe that's what's really the issue, is that I didn't say anything. So I am holding on to all that stress and all that energy, and it's driving my adrenals crazy. It's driving my body crazy. It's driving my head crazy. And the only thing that's going to ground me is this piece of chocolate.
That's right. Yeah.
And so then you could look at, okay, what else can I use instead? Or am I just going to accept the fact that, you know what? Chocolate is my thing. It grounds me. It makes me happy. I celebrate it with it. I'm depressed with it. You know, maybe it's just looking at it from that standpoint of it's okay. It doesn't make me a worse person by eating a piece or two of chocolate.
Right. Oh, it's looking at the pros and cons and being objective about it, and asking yourself, is this the way that I want to handle this emotional stress, is with chocolate? You know, because if you're allergic to chocolate, then you have that to deal with. And if it's causing weight gain, then you have that to deal with, right?
And if it's causing guilt, then you've got that to deal with. So much of it is, you know, all these things, all the emotional stuff that get layered on top of it. I was actually working with a new client today, and at one point, I asked them, like, what's some of your favorite foods? Oh, but I've been told I can't eat it. I didn't ask you what is, if today were your last day, it's not, but if it were, what would be some of the foods that you would include today? I'm going to give you permission to include those into your diet a couple times a week, or whatever the situation is. But, you know, I give you permission to eat that. And it totally changes their perspective.
Right. Right. But it's looking at the pros and cons and seeing if that's, you know, why is it that you were told that you couldn't eat that? And maybe that's not the truth. And maybe you misunderstand. It's having a conversation about it and putting all the cards on the table and asking yourself what you want to do and what you need to do, and then making choices based on what you want and need.
And it's really getting to that point, because a lot of times it's like, okay, well, that's the belief system you were told, but is that belief system really what you believe? Right. Or you're just accepting it because you'll get punished if you don't believe it.
Right.
So you give the client the permission to look at all the other aspects. Is this true? And I agree with you. You have to start that conversation.
Right. Yeah. I mean,
and eventually you can do it yourself.
Yeah. How many people eat low-fat diets, and that's not necessarily good for everybody, you know? So it's really low fat.
I loved when snack balls came out, because those are the no-fat cookies, and I was like, finally. Oh my God, the amount of weight I put on like in 2 weeks was ridiculous. And I started looking, I was like, wait, that's because I'm eating like 10 cookies at a time because they're fat-free, you know. But in reality, when I started looking at what the ingredients were, then I was like, well, it's all sugar. No wonder it's a problem. I am not even satisfied with this, so I have to have 10.
Right. Exactly.
If I had a cookie, then I'm going to be fine, you know, because I'm going to enjoy that one cookie.
Right.
And if I'm not enjoying the cookie, I'm going to pick something else that I'm going to fully enjoy.
Right.
Because that is part of minimizing that stress response.
Right. So yeah, when you give yourself permission and you're looking at the pros and cons, you're taking full responsibility for the decision, as well as accepting the consequences. You know, as instead of hiding from the decision and thinking it's someone else imposing that on you, and then feeling like you have to sneak around and cheat and feel guilty and shame.
And all that causes more stress.
Exactly. So the dynamic, I hope we're showing people what this dynamic is. And, you know, so changing that around, that perception or perspective of, these are my choices, this is my life, I'm going to take responsibility for the pros and the cons, and accept all the consequences, and go from there. Then, you know, that will allow you to put all the cards on the table, allow you to be very clear with yourself and with others when you make those decisions.
Yeah. And sometimes we only have this many cards to start with, and it's like, well, why didn't I realize this sooner? Well, this is you beating yourself up some more, creating more stress.
Right.
Well, maybe you weren't ready for those extra cards yet. Give yourself that permission. Like, you know what? It's kind of like the whole hindsight is 2020. Well, at the time, that was the best decision with the things that you knew. Now you know a few other pieces of your puzzle. Now you can make a better decision for what you need in this moment and let go of any attachment to your bad decision or good decision. It was just a decision that was in the past.
Right. Exactly.
So a lot of it is being able to, okay, let's bring you into the present moment, because the present is all you are able to make decisions on.
Right.
And we dwell so much in the past, which that's also the fear of the past and re-experiencing the past, re-experiencing the criticism, re-experiencing, whatever it is, hardship, heartbreak. That's all the stress that gets added on. Exactly. That we need to be able to release and process differently than we have in the past, because, training is great. Going, riding my bike, running, swimming, weightlifting, all that is really great for me until I need 2 hours to clear my head. Well, then I need a new way. It wasn't until I actually had my adrenal exhaustion that I realized that I had to deal with my stress in a completely different way.
Right.
Because that was a stress on its own as well. And it just added on top of that. But with or without the Ironman, I would have gotten there.
Right.
Because it's also runs in my family.
Right. Yeah. So you mentioned 2 of the 5 about emotional eating. What are the other 3? Can you go to the next one?
So I said becoming aware of the trigger, then acknowledge the emotion in the situation. Breathing is actually the third one, or the second one. But it's, I made that like the focal point because I really want people to acknowledge that this is actually something easy to do.
Right.
But it's once we learn how to kind of connect to that calmness, it's amazing the other options that become available. So once we can make that connection with, okay, what is it that I really want? What is it that I really need to do next? That only comes after you're aware of the trigger, accepted that it's a trigger, and kind of breathe so you can connect with that next level of insight and be able to see the different viewpoints.
Right.
And then just choose what you want. What does your heart want you to do?
What do you want?
What does your body want you to do? And I think that's one of the harder ones, is really listening to, okay, well, what does my body want? My mind wants all these things, but is that really what my body needs? And I relapsed a couple of times with my, well, I shouldn't say a couple of times. I relapsed with my adrenal exhaustion. So 6 months after, 6 or 7 months after I relapsed with my adrenal exhaustion. But I had spent the whole spring, because I was diagnosed in February, I spent the whole spring kind of rehabbing, doing all slow, long distance training. I got back to doing 2 half Ironmans that summer, and everything was fine. And then in August, I did 3 sprint races and 1 Olympic in the span of 3 weeks. And after the third one, I went to go for a run, and I'm like, crap, I think I just relapsed. I'm back to where I was 7 months ago. What the heck?
Wow. And I'm curious, what did you find as being the trigger that kept coming up for you for these relapses? Did you notice?
Well, part of it is that balance with the exercise, because my mind said go and push and push and push. But when your adrenals are, when you're in that place of fatigue and stress, your body wants a little bit more rest and relaxation. It's not saying don't do any exercise, but I did 3 high intensity events, and those high intensity events just completely drained my adrenals, and I didn't know. Right. So that was my body's, that was God's way of teaching me, like, okay, when you do this, this is what happens, this is the balance. Exactly. So 3 in a row just got me wiped out again.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I often talk about it with this particular, finding that sweet spot of just doing enough to help boost your immune system, but not so much where you crash. So it is finding that sweet spot that's so important, and not overdoing it, because I do find some of especially my young adults who are athletic and really want to get back out there, and they just overdo
Send
it.
it to me. I'll tell them how it really is.
Yeah. But it is important to do some exercise, just not too much, and slowly build your endurance over time.
Yeah, and that's the challenge, because as athletes we're quite competitive, and so it's the goal, and we actually love pushing our bodies beyond our limits,
right?
Because if you don't push, then what are you going to learn? You can't know unless you push through some boundary to know if that boundary was a good one to push through or not.
Right. Yeah.
But then we get addicted to that endorphin high and that pushing, and then we can't we sometimes get disconnected to what our body's actually asking us to do.
Right.
So even in the beginning, I remember living in Chicago, and it was, suddenly it was, 50 degree day. And, in Chicago, it's similar to Rhode Island. It's when it gets that warm, you think it's, 90 degrees because you're used to 7. But you go out on your bike, and you're like, oh, I feel great today. I'm going to go for a 2-hour bike ride. Do you know that I would just be wiped out for like 3 or 4 days?
Wow.
And 2-hour bike ride was like, this is easy.
Right.
And so it's like the first time I did it, I still felt great that whole day, because I just, I feel great. I'm going to do all this stuff. And then I'd be wiped out for 3 days. And I'm like, how did I do that? And then I would feel great, and I'd be doing like too much again. And it took a couple of cycles of those to go, okay, I like the feeling great part. Now let's see if you can string 2 or 3 days of those together, and then 3 or 4 more, and then a week, and then a month, but it took a couple of tries to realize that when I feel good, maybe 45 minutes is all that my body needs to be able to maintain that for tomorrow, and maintain that for the next day, because I get caught up in that whole adrenal rush and that whole adrenaline and the whole endorphin, that I'm like, I don't want this ever to end, so I'll just keep going.
Right.
And so I spent a good time doing that.
Right. So you basically decided, instead of doing a 2-hour bike ride, you did a 45-minute bike ride, and that didn't cause you to crash and lose 3 days. That's right. That's a perfect example for this audience to hear. I think it's really important. It's not exercising. It's just cutting back and finding that sweet spot, and then working up slowly to an hour bike ride, and then an hour and 15-minute bike ride, right? And
the key thing, it was too, that I wanted consecutive days of feeling good.
Right.
So I had this, I felt really good. So I had done all my homework and did all my recovery, so to speak, to get there. So on that day I felt good. I'm like, I feel like myself. So I tried to be like my former self, but I wasn't recovered yet. So I had to recognize that, okay, you're not recovered yet. But it took a few times to go, okay, I feel like me, I'm going to go do me. But me needed a new definition.
Right.
Me needed a new slate. Me needed to forget about, okay, your 2-hour norm isn't your 2-hour norm right now.
Right. And it's not that it can't ever be in the future.
Correct. But it isn't right now.
Right.
And so I had to do that a couple times to go, hello, let's look at this differently.
Right.
Let's look at this and say, okay, why am I doing this? This is what I really want. I want, and I started with 3. I really want 3 good days. So what's the minimum that I need to move so that I feel good again tomorrow and the next day?
Excellent way of thinking about it. That's really spot on.
Yeah. And that's how I got better. And that's how I was able to do, get my training back and not have to suffer through the big ups and downs and ups and downs. Right. It's like progress.
So let me ask you this. What did you change in your diet in order to support that? And because you talked about protein bars and coffee.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Yeah.
And
And those
easy.
little
They're
chocolate bars. What did you put into your body on a daily basis? And I want you to mention that, but also what are the top three things that you cut out of your diet to help you heal?
So I didn't really do necessarily that much of the cutting out, because as I was putting things in, those things just automatically went out. So a lot of the bars actually left because I had to use real food.
Mm-hmm.
And so real food was the basis of what I do with my clients too. It's like, yeah, I could do supplements, which, like, as we said, are the bridge,
Right.
but let's change the food first. Have you noticed the difference between how you feel based on the foods that you're eating, and then move on to the next step? But I learned how to juice, and that was the first thing that I did, was juicing. And for me, it was juicing vegetables, like fruits. They spike my blood sugar way too much.
Mm-hmm.
So even now, 20 years later, I don't eat a lot of fruit, and people are like, oh, but they're so healthy. I'm like, but they spike my blood sugar. I'd rather eat a baked potato than an apple, because the potato will last longer for me than the apple, even though they're exactly the same amount of calories.
Right.
So a lot of it was, I had to balance my blood sugar. I had to balance the carbohydrates with the proteins, with the fats, and start adding more vegetables. And I really had to add more vegetables more often. And at one point, I think 8 years ago or 10 years ago, I made a competition with myself that I'm going to get at least 8 servings of green vegetables a day.
Right.
Wait a second, where are you going to put them in extra? Breakfast. So I started adding broccoli for breakfast.
That's great. Yeah. I always say, if you don't like breakfast food, have dinner at breakfast time. And there's no rules saying that you have to have breakfast food at breakfast time,
But this is the key thing, where you just said the breakfast food. But who taught you breakfast food? The commercials.
Of course.
Did your parents feed you, traditional breakfast foods? Or was somebody else the one to teach you breakfast food? Your body doesn't really know what time of day it is. Right. So you want to feed it the foods that you feel the best on, regardless of what time of day it is. So breakfast is really breaking the fast from the last time you ate at dinner, which typically should be between 6 and 7 p.m. And you haven't eaten now for 11, 12 hours.
Right.
There's your fast, and you're breaking that fast.
Right.
Why can't we break it with whatever it is that we feel is nourishing our body?
Exactly. Yeah. Most people eat, what is it? Especially in this country. Well, cereal with milk.
Yeah, cold cereal.
Yeah. Gluten and dairy right there. But donuts and croissants, I mean, really, it's full of sugar and gluten.
And inflammatory wheat, yeah.
Yes, very inflammatory foods. And not only that, it actually makes you more hungry a couple hours later.
Right, because it's spiking the blood sugar, and then it plummets. And when it plummets, you're tired, cranky, and irritable. So what goes well with tired, cranky, and irritable? Coffee and everything that goes with coffee: sugar, cream, muffin, donut, and more croissants and cookies. And so you start that cycle, and that actually is a trigger. That was actually a trigger for me. Mm-hmm. That's what I had to undo, because that's what led me into adrenal exhaustion too. It's that constant up and down and spiking the blood sugar. So it made me tired. So I would have more coffee, more sugar, more coffee, more sugar. Right. Well, you can only beat a horse that many times.
Yeah, the blood sugar regulation does go up and down with adrenaline and cortisol regulation. So sometimes you can really straighten out the cortisol release just by straightening out the blood sugars. And so using
I had no release. I had zero release.
Right.
So there was nothing. I was already beyond that part. Balancing the blood sugar was a key part, where I had to recognize, where I was spiking and dropping. And coffee was another thing where I love coffee. But I had to actually stop drinking coffee as much as I was, because that was also just overdriving my adrenals.
Absolutely. It's a major, especially if you're drinking a lot of coffee. So, two to three, even four, some people drink a pot of coffee, which is ridiculous, but even two
But
to
that's
three cups is a lot for some people. Yeah.
Yeah. The weirdest part was that because I was overstimulated, I needed to drink like chamomile tea, and Tazo made a calm tea that I just loved. And I would get more energy from drinking the calm Tazo tea than I would from a cup of coffee.
Wow.
And I was like, well, that's weird. And I always just thought it was weird, but it's like, well, no, your adrenals, the more caffeine you have, the more you put your adrenals in overdrive, then the more tired you are in the afternoon.
Right.
So if you limit that coffee, I mean, this is an experiment that everybody can do. How do you feel with 1 cup of coffee? How do you feel with 2? How do you feel in the afternoon based on that 1, 2, or 3 cups of coffee in the morning? And then start, making it, if you love the taste of coffee like me, then you start making it half calf, half decaf.
Right. Right. Yeah, it's hard for some people to separate out the withdrawal from coffee in order to even know. So it does take some time to cut back to that 1 cup of coffee just to do that experiment. But it's a great idea to do an experiment.
Yeah. Well, and again, it's finding that balance, because if you have, I've loved the taste of coffee since I was 8, since I was introduced to it. And I just love the taste of coffee. And I've done my own detox plan, which says no coffee for the 2 weeks. And I found a substitute that I could tolerate for 2 weeks. But as soon as 2 weeks was over, I'm like, oh no, coffee's back. And there's just something about coffee, but I can do the decaf and get just as much pleasure out of the decaf as with the regular. And I have to find that balance all the time. Like, okay, do I like it this way? Do I like it that way? Is it this much or that much? Do I really need more coffee? No, I need to deal with the stress in a different way.
Right, right. There are things about coffee that people need to understand. Sometimes people think that they have a problem with coffee, but a lot of the coffee that comes into this country is contaminated with mold. So if you have mold, a mold sensitivity or yeast mold kind of crossover sensitivity, you do have to try and see if maybe that's the problem as opposed to the actual coffee, and to get a mold-free coffee and try that out.
Mold-free?
There are definitely brands. I'm blanking on them. There's a brand in my head that starts with a C, but I can send it to you. Something Organo Gold. I think that's the name. Organo Gold. Yeah. I believe that's the name of the company, Organo Gold. Yeah. I can send you a link for that if you're interested. But yeah, it is something to definitely take a look at, especially if you do know about mold exposure and mold toxicity. And if you notice that coffee is if you have this almost inflammatory reaction by drinking coffee, having put it off and then putting it back into your diet and having.
Yeah. And that's, a lot of times when I'm working with clients, it's trying to get them to that place where that they'll even entertain that. But once they understand that, coffee is actually overstressing your adrenals, we have to find a different alternative, or at least minimizing how much you're consuming. But if it's something that you absolutely love, then we have to find a balance of what they're willing to do and what they're not willing to do. And I've got some clients where they will actually drink a green juice, like a juice extraction juice, and then they don't need their coffee.
Right. Yeah. So what I sometimes suggest is maybe it's not even the coffee. Maybe it's just having a warm cup of something, right?
Well, and that's
Yeah. It's just a habit. It's a habit of, sometimes some habits are there because it's just a habit, like a cigarette. So you could put something else in your mouth instead of the cigarette, So it doesn't have to be something that's burning and giving you all these toxins.
But it's like you said earlier, it's like recognizing the pattern, so whether it's coffee, whether it's chocolate, whether it's emotional triggers, well, what's the pattern? Is this, and for me, like coffee, I do love the taste of it. And there is something about it being in that hot mug.
Right.
The tea never did it except for in the afternoon. In the morning, not quite.
Right. Right. Yeah.
So
Yeah. So, the other, are you still doing triathlons or are you still working at that elite level of athleticism nowadays?
no, I'm working on getting back to that level of elite athleticism because I actually started to degenerate the other hip.
Mm-hmm.
And so, with injuries and recovery, sometimes they recover, sometimes they don't. This one didn't. So now, I've got an imbalance in my hip, but I'm being competitive about allowing it to recover. I'm being competitive about, okay, well, what do I need to do today to improve the form and function so that I can get back to that level of training?
Right.
So it's changing the focus. I'm still competitive. I am never going to let go of that. It's just part of who I am.
Right. Yeah.
So, but it's changing the focal point and going, okay, I can forget about where I was and just enjoy how I'm doing this. And I can be competitive and I'm going to pay attention to what my body wants and what's working and what's not. Where are the imbalances? Who do I need to work with to help with re-engaging it properly? Or is it something that I can do myself?
Right. Yeah, I know you had one hip replacement and you're trying to preserve the other hip by working with someone.
Yeah. Well, the first one I learned all about the anti-inflammatory diet, and food has a relationship to pain and inflammation. So having gone through that, it was definitely that was the learning experience. And I can definitively say food will make inflammation worse, or it can be better. It can be your medicine, or it can be your painful poison.
Right.
So now on this other one, it's like, okay, well, now you got to learn about this whole degeneration, arthritis, balancing the microbiome in addition to all of it, because the body can heal.
Right. Right.
I'm just giving it the tools to let it heal. And I have to be competitive with that part too. And listen to what's enough, what's not enough. Do I want to go ride my bike 2 hours? Absolutely. But my body, some days it's like, no, 36 minutes is enough.
Right. 36 minutes.
Like,
exactly.
Okay. And I had to let go of what the number is and just say, okay, my body just said, if I do one more minute more, then I might actually hurt myself more. And my job right now is to fuel my recovery. And that's the priority.
Right. Right. Yeah. So, so with your exercise program, where are you now in terms of what you're doing? Are you riding your bike for 36 minutes a day, or
everything's balanced. That's why I became a triathlete, because cycling ended up being something that I kind of naturally fell into and was naturally good at.
Mm-hmm.
But I like variety.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, I swim twice a week. I added weight training back in finally, and I ride. I'm waiting for all the pieces to move back to where they're supposed to be. So I'm still on what I call hip rehab.
Right.
I move every day, and I still include yoga. And it's finding that balance. And sometimes I do yoga 3-4 days a week, and other weeks it's once.
Right.
Because my body asks me something else every day.
Mm-hmm.
So I just kind of go with it. But my body likes movement. It likes to do something.
Right. Yeah. I recently actually got a trampoline, one-person trampoline, to jump on through the winter because I usually play ultimate frisbee, and because of the snow on the ground, it's been hard to be out there.
Can you do it with snowshoes?
I didn't feel comfortable running on the snow. Yeah, so with 2 ACL repairs of my knees.
Oh, yeah.
I have my own hip subluxation. I was a little worried about not having the ability to have traction. So I got a trampoline, and that's been a lot of fun, really working on a trampoline. I've never done that before, but when you talk about competitiveness, I'm similar in that where I exercise in order to improve a specific, to meet a specific goal. So I decided this winter I'm going to work on jumping so that I can catch frisbees when I play ultimate frisbee. So I want to be able to jump higher.
Yeah.
So trampoline's going to help me with that.
Yeah.
So yeah, I used to run marathons when I was younger, but after having 3 kids, I wasn't able to continue that. So I switched to ultimate frisbee and playing soccer.
Yeah, but it's, it's finding that balance. And right now my focus is form and function. And so I'm trying to get that right side to be all form and function. And, there's sometimes where I'm frustrated, but it's like, you know what? It's getting better. Every day is a little bit better. Even if it's like this much of an improvement, it's still this much of an improvement. Right. And in the last 2 days, I got this new it's a contraption. I'm calling it a contraption. But it's called Myosource bands. And you have a band that one band that Velcros onto the right above the knee on one leg and on the other. And you have 2 bands that add on. And it actually helps with all that stability in the hips and glutes.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I started doing some of the exercises that came in the booklet. And I was like, oh, well, you are really at the novice stage, but this is going to be the fun part.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's important to set little goals, like you said, and make it fun. Make it as fun as you can. And if you make those little steps on those little goals, then it's the trajectory that makes all it. If you're moving it in the right direction, you will eventually meet your goals if you continue in that direction. Yeah.
Right. And when you're in it is sometimes the hardest part to see that how far you've come.
Right.
We only see how far we have to go. Right. And so part of this whole adrenal exhaustion and working through those emotional triggers is breathe, really look at it from a different lens, and then make the assessment based on what's really there.
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, it's time to wrap up. I just wanted to thank you for coming and being part of my show here, my little show.
And we can talk about this all day,
I know, yeah. And contributing to that, I think I'm sure there's a lot that people can learn from what you just said. And I know that you have something that you wanted to share that I will put into the show notes. It was the 5.
It's basically 5 easy steps to ease triggers.
Right. So I will include that in the show notes, as well as a method if anybody wanted to contact you. I know you're in Pennsylvania.
Yes.
So, and you are available as a holistic nutritionist to work with people if they wanted to. And I will give them your email to contact.
Yeah, well, they could just go to my website too, which is nutritioninmotion.net.
Right. Okay.
If you do .com, you might get the one in either Massachusetts or Des Moines, Iowa.
Okay.
So it's
There's 2 others, huh?
nutritioninmotion.net.
Okay.
And then you'll find me, and then we can, schedule 15 minutes or whatever it is that you need. And yeah, I think the biggest takeaway is just realize where you are.
Right.
And be present so that you can actually see the situation that's really presenting.
Mm-hmm.
And just breathe, connect with who you are, connect with what you want, and then make the decision based on that.
Yeah.
And that applies to exercise, moving, anything, food, emotional triggers. And if you have adrenal exhaustion, you got to do that a little bit more. Maybe that's why that came along, is because that may be the thing that we need to learn.
Right. Yeah. It all comes down to, looking at foods, toxins, stress, and you briefly mentioned the microbiome, and where I look at chronic infections and rebalancing the microbiome. We've talked about that in other episodes, but I'm
it's
really
all related.
Yeah.
It's all about finding that balance, and it sounds like, oh, balance, we're not talking about going on a balance beam, but everything is supposed to be in a state of homeostasis. So if you pull here, then this is going to drop.
Right.
If you pull here, then something falls over.
Right.
So it's about recognizing where you are, what part of you is pulling or pushing too hard so that something else is, falling apart.
Right.
And that's how I got to my adrenal exhaustion, is that I didn't recognize it all. I just kept pushing.
Right.
Because that's how you get to the end. You push.
Right. Yeah. All righty. It was great to talk to you, Joanna.
Good talking to you too. Thank you, Achina.
You're welcome.
Have a blessed day.
You too. Take care.